All right, I've been playing around with Caves and Catacombs. This is a pen and paper dungeon crawl plus wilderness supplement and an expanded version here of material that I want to show you. I mentioned this first in a video I did a little while ago that was a kind of indie roundup of a bunch of independent games, and I'll put the link to that somewhere around here so you could see that. In that video, I said that I was struggling a little bit with the balance of the game. I kept dying, and I have had some back and forth with the designer about that. He was kind enough to send me this material as well as the two supplements. And in this video, I want to go over what I've done with the game a little bit and also show you the supplements that I think add, at least one of them adds like an extremely great amount to the gameplay. I think this is there's something about this that I really like. There's something about it that I find frustration with, because I think it is still imbalanced and maybe it needs a little more play testing, but I'm coming back to it because I think it's a great option for people who are looking for something that is portable, especially this time of year when people travel around. It's easy to take with you with a couple of D6s, and it has the lightness in a way of the actual mechanics of Four Against Darkness, but as we know, Four Against Darkness has so much content, which is wonderful. It can be a little bit challenging to figure out what to do there. And it doesn't really feel to me anymore like a very kind of grab and go sort of game, because you have to figure out what you're actually going to take and play. And it's pretty involved at this point, not mechanically, but content wise. However, Caves and Catacombs is not. And as such, I think it serves a great purpose. The basic original book, or the initial book, is essentially a dungeon crawl. You have rules for making your characters that form fairly standard categories here. You have a bard, a cleric, a druid, a fighter, and a ranger, and you have a thief and a wizard. You've got spells. You have the tables to create a basic quest. You do need to sort of, if you want narrative, you need to add that onto it, but you can do so by rolling up. There's dungeon themes that you can get by rolling on these tables and imbue your game with as much story as you want. There are lists of NPCs here, and I think these are useful in terms of bringing some theme into your game if you wish. Ditto with the artifacts. So it does form, it gives you a little bit of a framework to develop a little bit more onto it. There are some special enemies. There's a lot that's left to your own decision making about like how you want these special enemies to be in the game, for example. And you begin by making your dungeon and defining the segment types. There's basic tables here for rolling on the room contents, so you may get a threat or special contents or furniture. But again, if you roll on something that's, say, for example, a special content, it doesn't necessarily tell you, you're not going to go to the bonfire and then have like another table as to like what to do with it. So again, it's a framework, I think, and an accessible framework for making your own additions to the dungeon crawl. You have some flavor here. Again, it would be up to you to determine whether, for example, if there was a thick fog, that had any impact on gameplay. The character actions, there's a skill test modifier here. Once again, doesn't really tell you when to employ this, but it is built into the rules if you wish to do so. And for basically all of the things that you're doing in the game, you're rolling a d6 with some modifiers, and if you roll 3 or lower, you fail. If you roll a 4, you get what you want, but there's a cost. So for example, in combat, that would mean you would land a hit, but you would also get hit, and 5 or higher, you get to succeed in what you are doing. And there are some rules for opening doors and handling traps and things of this nature. So, again, the framework is familiar, but it is a nice basis for making it a little bit more rich if you want to add other things onto it. What I ended up doing was we have this page here on class modifier. So I've attempted to play this a number of times and I kept dying. My most recent one was I wanted to make a bard and a druid go through a dungeon. And I found per the rules that it was just basically impossible to do because of the balance. And if you started with level 1 and the starting weapons, you just never really had enough power to deal with the basic enemies that were coming through, even with my eagle companion that I gave the druid. However, I decided to add in some bonus and make my characters start out more than level 1. And when I tinkered with that, it began to feel at least a little more possible. So I wasn't just dying in even the first room in some cases. So I do think it needs a little, from my perspective, it needs a little handiwork to make it happen. I think all of the examples in the game book of combat, for example, are basing it on the fighter character. And I think the fighter character to me is the only one that seems like it could work at the first level. And so it is interesting to me that all of the examples are using that character. I'm just still unclear as to, I would love to know if anyone watching this video has managed to play this game, say using just a cleric. The instructions say that you can play more than one character, but it even suggests that at the outset you start with just one character. So I would be curious about people's success level there. And you get to search for treasure here, so there's that opportunity. And there are some things that you can purchase with money that you might get that will help you out, like more armor and potions, etc. And we have the enemies listed here in the back. Again, pretty standard, but very functional and just a pleasant way to spend some time and give yourself an opportunity to tinker a little bit. There's a yes/no oracle that you do not really need for the gameplay, and there's not really even an instruction as to when you might use it, but it does say there are times when you might want to be answering a yes or no question. And there's even some suggestion here about how to play this, use this using other modules, which I'm not really going to get into. The game itself is based on or inspired by some Hero Quest mechanics, and there's a little instruction here if you want to play it using the original Hero Quest game board, you can do so. I, alas, do not have that game board. So when I played it this last time, what I was really trying to do as part of just enhancing the experience was to take each little section and maybe do a little bit of a drawing there and try to really think about what was going on with my fighting. So this is I went and had some skeletons and a corridor, and there were some obstacles there. And just, this was a pit that I fell into. I mean, it was just kind of for fun and for a different way of treating every room. I wasn't focused so much on outlining the dungeon per se, but just each experience of the dungeon. But it was here where I ran into Riley Tannell, the cleric, who was a level 3 cleric, that I had printed out and started to use the enhanced supplement. And that's what I want to focus on a little bit now, because I do think that adds a great amount to this game. So there's 2 supplements here, and we're going to look at the enhanced one first. They don't, fortunately, the cover sheet doesn't indicate what it is, but I think this is called the enhanced rules, and it is listed as a supplement. There's some random events which I think are excellent, and some other combat actions, some other items, and some alternate encounter tables, as well as a turning the undead table. You do need the basic rules to use this supplement, so it really is a true supplement in that regard. The thing that I want to focus on is there's these tags that are given for creatures, and again, it might form the foundation of some additional thing that you could bring to it. So if you encountered something that said it was hostile, that might lead you in one direction, or something is long range, there's ranged fighting here. And there's also a reaction table for the monsters, so you could uh, have this, if they have an attitude, they will not necessarily engage in combat all in the same way. There are different impacts, like you could be paralyzed, and it will tell you what that means. And then there are the monsters. Now, these are listed sort of by category. So we have the demons here, and then we have the giants, and we have the humans and the humanoids and other folk. I wish there was just an alphabetical listing, because it can be a little bit, or an index or something, because I found myself, when I needed to find something, I found myself flipping around a lot to figure out where it would be. But it is nice to have the further descriptions, and it just, again, it gives you a little bit more to look at and conceptualize in your mind for a new a little bit more depth and richness and theme to what's going on here. So I really enjoyed this, and there are quite a few of them. So you could see as I page through, there's a lot of material here. And then the other thing that's really meaty about this supplement and adds a huge amount, I will show you only part of, so as not to spoil it, are the events. So to generate these random events, you are going to be using just a basic deck of cards with no jokers, and each suit is going to correspond to something specific. So you may have challenges, you may have environments that are described with something to happen, a non-combat encounter, or the influence of the kind of ruler of this world. And these are going to be things that will randomly kind of weaken your PCs. The way that you call in an event is if you are rolling on a segment and you get two even numbers, then you would be drawing an event card. So on 2d6, whatever two even numbers you happen to roll, you would draw the event. If you just rolled at least one odd number, you would continue on with your regular generation. I found like I wasn't getting the events enough, so I just was trying to figure out a different way to get them, maybe a little bit more. It was probably just the way that I was rolling. There are, again, more skill tests here that are suggested by these events, and it's the same basic procedure that you would, when attempting an action, you would roll your d6, apply whatever modifiers you had. On a 3 or less, it's a fail. On a 4, there's going to be a partial success or a success and a consequence. And then on a 5, you will actually succeed. So I don't really want to show you all of them, but they're all here, and they add quite a bit. So this one, I don't recall what card brought this person through, but this was the event I encountered where I sort of ran into this somebody I really ended up needing and adding to my party, this level 3 cleric, and I ended up giving him his own whole card because I was not doing so well. But the events really do bring in a lot to the gameplay, and as such, for that alone, I recommend this enhanced supplement. So there are also encounter tables that you can use instead of the default table in the rule book. You can roll them up by a difficulty level if you want. I made a little random table for myself to just kind of randomize what the difficulty would be. And then there are enemies that go with the special enemies. There are kind of minions that are thematic to, like the corrupted cleric, for example. as well as for different types of dungeons. So these tables will allow you to take the enemies from both here and in the main book, and it kind of makes a theme for you. So if you're in a prison or if you're in the sewers, you're going to have a table that will give you enemy appropriate kinds of things, and I think that's very useful. And then there are the tables for locations, and this brings us to the wilderness supplement that I'm going to talk about, but I'll show you here. There's an enemies for the coastline, for deserts, forests, grasslands, as well as water, swamp, mountains, and then there are the thematic ones that are listed, dinosaurs, for example, or the elementals or eldritch creatures. So there's quite a bit of new content here. And now we're going to look at the final supplement. This is a shorter one. I've got it here in the front. It's about, I don't know how many pages it is, but it's a few pages. It takes you outside. It's a wilderness supplement, and it will give you very basic, you're using the same characters. There are some new skills if you want to either change your character, like add give yourself a ranger character, or enhance a character you have, like the druid. You're getting an extra die for foraging, which is a new rule here. And you will be instructed to use a hex grid and to make some different terrains. And there's Arctic, desert, forest, grasslands, mountains, swamp, and water. And the key thing here, which I also really like and helps, again, create this sense of like you're making a little RPG here, that you're given action points, which correspond roughly to the time that is passing in a day. And there are rules for how much every type of activity will take, and you need to feed yourself with provisions and utilize your action points for doing that. And even combat takes an action point. So that remains thematic to kind of being in this environment where time is actually passing. There's also distance here. We bring in ranged combat, so you can roll for whether an enemy is near or far, and then what the impact of that is on your modifiers for escaping combat, for example. And there are also terrain modifiers that can impact how many action points you are given in any situation. So if you are in a situation to try to forage in the Arctic, it takes 3 action points, whereas if you're foraging in the grasslands, it only takes 1. Again, it makes sense to being outside and interacting with the terrain in that way. So it's a light rule set, but it does add again, it's more of a framework for experiencing this game outside. I have to say, I'm really not too thrilled with the way I've figured out how to put this together. So that's on me, but sorry for the mess. In any case, to play this part of the game, it's telling you to have a hex grid. I don't actually know that you need a hex grid per se, because didn't see rules for, necessarily movement like northeast, southwest, but maybe that's just more thematic to an outside kind of thing. I think you could use a regular grid if you wanted. And you will choose a hex as a starting point and then roll on this table to see what will be next based on where you are and how it expands. And then for each hex, you're going to get an opportunity to roll on a table that provides either a special feature or some type of location or nothing special. You could have a weather event or a natural phenomenon, and then you get the random tables that are these things. Now, again, you're not getting a table within a table within a table. So if you're having a camping encounter on the ice, the ice beneath the camp starts to crack and groan ominously, suggesting potential instability or shifting ice flows, it would then be up to you to decide, am I rolling on the oracle to see, yes, no, is this ice going to break? If the ice does break, do I have an encounter? You could then go to the thematic encounters for the Arctic and roll on that table if you found somebody or something there. But it is up to you to decide the impact of these things. But it is nice that the tables are here for that. And we also have location tables with settlements and the Arctic and the desert. So again, you will find things for these locations. Some of them do provide an in-game, like a specific in-game impact. So if you found this Forsaken table, you could roll a 1d6 and then determine that, oh, if you got a 5 or 6, you found a dungeon under this temple. Sorry, I said table, but I meant temple. You found a dungeon under here, and then you might create your whole dungeon, and it would be a temple theme, and you could go from there. Or I suppose you could ignore it, but just know that it's there. Or it might be abandoned and empty. Or if you found if you were in the mountains and you came upon a trade crossroads, you might find merchants there that would be providing provisions and potions, and go to those tables and treat that as a location and something you actually found that you could interact with. Again, you could add the layer of complexity if you went to the Oracle table, maybe saying, do they want to trade with me, or, are they hostile, etc. And ditto, we have tables for the natural phenomenon. So things you might see in the grasslands, or things you would see in the forest. But again, whether you interacted with that or how is going to be left up to your imagination. And the weather conditions do come with some in-game impact, like a foraging test might have a penalty of -1 if there's a gentle rain somewhere, or if there's a snowstorm, trailblazing tests would have a penalty of -3. So those would have in-game impacts. So that is a look at, we'll just look at one more thing, these special features here for the different terrains. So again, if you found this eroded Sphinx statue, you could choose to search it. What would you find? How difficult that would be? All up to you. So the framework is here, especially for the wilderness portion of it. I think it offers something that nothing's coming to mind that kind of fits exactly this in this gaming spot, because wilderness, there's not a lot of wilderness generation, and especially a light framework for it where you have enough to kind of feel like you are outside of a dungeon and moving around and having a party that has a campsite, and that there's terrain effects and different types of enemies that may be prowling around, without a huge framework and without the need for a lot of lift in terms of rules. So that, I think, the wilderness part of it is great. The events part in the expanded supplement, also really great to just add some flavor, make it less generic of a dungeon crawl. But even the basic, I think, one here, despite the imbalance, I think like I said, for a very light rule set, especially, I just always think about when I'm traveling, do I want to grab something for the odd 45 minutes or something that I have? I think this would be a wonderful kind of product to have. So if you do want to try your hand at going beyond a rule set and creating a solo RPG experience that is an outgrowth of a rule set, I think this is a great framework to use.